Moondrop has a new planar with a pretty brave price point. Let's talk about it. This is the Moondrop Para, similarly priced to things like the Heifman Sundara, the Sennheiser HD6XO line, and a lot of legendary headphones. This one, well, that puts it right up against fierce competition. And I guess the question is, does it hold up to that? At first glance, you might look at this and say, oh, that looks a lot like the Moondrop Venus, but it is a bit different. This top bedband is a little bit thinner. Parts of the construction are slightly different as well. We have this transparent plastic around the 3.5mm jacks, and when you pull off the pads, you see more of it around the inside of the cup and baffle. The pads themselves are seated on a metal ring that just magnets right onto the baffle, which is a pretty smart design all things considered. This means you can swap pads pretty easily, and you may want to do so as the stock pads are, well, a bit underwhelming. I've definitely seen much worse pads on the market, but these are a bit small, a bit thin. They do come with another set of pads, but it dramatically alters the sound in a negative way. The pads look pretty large when you see their outer diameter, but when you see the inside, well, that's not a ton of space. And they're not particularly deep either. When these are on my head, I do feel the metal touching my ears, and the pad is compressing my ear from pretty much all sides. So I could see this being a problem for more people. Aside from that though, I do love the visual design of this, specifically the outside grille here and how it's a single piece with the body. It looks like something from Braun designed almost by Dieter Rams from the 1980s. Beautiful looking headphone, but also very heavy. I just tried to toss it up a little bit and it just didn't leave my hand. The adjustment mechanism is pretty nice on the sides. It clicks firmly into place and it seems to hold it pretty well. All in all, the construction of this thing is great. It's just really heavy and not super comfortable. Do I feel like it's a headphone that could probably take a beating though? I'd say so. I can't guarantee that as I've only had this for a few weeks, but it feels like it. What I really care about is sound quality. I'm sure that's what you guys care about too. So let's dig into that. By the way, just a quick note, since this channel doesn't use any affiliate links at all, I support the channel with things like merch. And I just stayed up till 3 in the morning designing what I think is the best hoodie I've ever made. It's got this tube on the front with the D logo that says good distortion. And on the back side, there's a bunch of graphs that I've pulled from various things I've been working on and then distorted them with a bit of a liquid mesh. I really like this design. If you want to help support the channel, you can check that out, the link in the video description. So how does Para stack up as far as sound goes? Well, it's average, very average. It's as if you took the Sundara and said, I want something that's heavier and has more treble. That's basically what you got here. It's a Sundara that's heavier and has more treble, which is never something I would ask for out of a Sundara. In fact, I could do with a little bit less treble. There are people out there who want a slightly brighter headphone than a Sundara, and this will probably meet their needs. They can stand how heavy it is. It shares some of the timbre of Sundara, but it's a bit more metallic in nature. Not quite as much as things that also have a bump around 1 kilohertz, but it gets to that degree, just a little bit. And as far as vocals go, they're definitely nice and clear, but they do sound very diffuse field. Diffuse field headphones usually lean a bit bright, and this has that characteristic, a bit brighter, a bit thinner, not quite as natural and not quite as full or present in the vocals, but still very clear. For things like electronic music, this could actually do pretty decent, but I wouldn't recommend it for anything acoustic. Now, it's not a bad headphone. It does a lot of things well. It sounds well articulated. It sounds like it stages well. It sounds like it has good imaging. Overall, the tonal balance isn't bad. The bass extension feels good. It also feels impactful. It feels dynamic. But the headphone is a bit thin. This does have more of a focus on mids than, say, the Moondrop Venus did, which is a plus. But the big downside is that at this price, you have to deal with the Heifman Sundara and the entire Sennheiser HD6XO line, and I would take both of those over the Para, unless you specifically love the looks of it or want something with more treble than a Sundara. Again, it's not a bad headphone, but it's also not a great headphone. It's very average. Moondrop's been doing a better and better job recently. I feel like from the Void to the Venus to here, they're continuously stepping their game up. And again, in the build department, I feel like they did a great idea if they could just knock off some weight. Let's take this from another angle and let's look at frequency response. I've got a graph pulled up here. This is on the Brüel & Kjær 4128C. This is a new and more informative way of displaying measurements. If you want to know more about these measurements, you can check out a link in the video description where Resolve talks about how these work. More or less, we're getting a lot more information here than if we just used a target. This gray window shows the average listener preference. It's something that you've probably seen before in the Harman research. There's a dotted line running right through the middle, and that's pretty close to the Harman target. And then outside of that, some people will want more or less treble and more or less bass. And the headphone we have here, well, you can tell bass extension's decent, but it does start to roll off a little bit. Not like crazy though, not as hard as an open back dynamic. The low mids have a little bit of warmth to them, but not much. Mid-range is mostly linear. We see a bit of a recess around 2 kilohertz, and then ear gain starts rising up from there. We spend most of the rest of the treble on the very top edge boundary of the average listener preference window. So some people will prefer more treble than Harman, and those people will land pretty much right at the peak of where this thing lands. Anything over that, and you get into the territory of things being a bit too bright. And this rides that line. In fact, in the upper treble, it kind of breaks past that line. Comparatively, again, we end up with something that is a lot like a Sundara, but that has more treble. Again, I would prefer a Sundara with less treble, but it is what it is. I think if they had taken this thing and reduced the treble a fair bit, made it a bit more linear, this would come away with a much stronger recommendation. It would still have to work on things like the weight and the pads, but it would come away with a much stronger recommendation. As it is at this price point, if you want a planar, I would buy the HiFiMan Sundara first. If you really want more treble than that, this would be the way to go. But at that whole price point, the headphone for me would still be the HD6XX. I mean, there's like 40 pairs of headphones in this room right now, and the 6XX is still the one that gets the most use out of all of them. I've had this in for several weeks, and I've just not wanted to use it. After I first listened to it the first few times, I haven't really had much of a desire to keep it on my head since then, and I've forced myself to use it. I'll put it on and I'll use it pretty much every day, but I don't want to. There's other things I would rather pull off the wall, and many of them are at a lower or similar price point. I'm glad that Moondrop is improving. I can see that they've made significant strides each time they release a new headphone, but to sell me on one, they still have a ways to go. Anyway, I think that's going to wrap up this video, guys. If you liked it, leave a like down below. A comment letting me know what you want to see in the future. If you want to get active in the community, you can at the forums or the Discord, both available at the link in the video description. As always, don't forget to stick around, subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Till next one, guys. Peace.